Work habit's good. One of our primary focuses this year, already having our system in and knowing a little bit more about what we're doing, is it's been a real focus on personnel, getting people in the right place and trying to identify those people who didn't help us very much last year due to age or inexperience or injury, seeing who's going to emerge and move up into that 2 deep and help us. So we still got a long way to go, both from a standpoint of our improvement and both obviously from a standpoint of number of practices. So we do have a few guys making some positive steps, but right now we've still got a long way to go and a lot of time for guys to make those moves.
Justin mentioned that he wants the defense to be able to play at a faster pace. Is that something that you saw in your evaluations last season?
Well, it's just something that we're getting more and more of. And so we just got to be prepared for it. We play at a fast pace here and do in practice. So we get a lot of it. I've been at places where we didn't run a tempo offense, and that makes it very difficult. But yeah, we do play some teams that go faster than we do. Some of them just have that philosophy. Texas A&M was, Ole Miss was, Missouri was. There were some teams who they don't do as much when they go fast, so they can obviously repeat plays and do it a little bit faster. But that's one of the things that we hope we can get a little bit cleaner on. And it's, as y'all have seen all the back and forth about the rule change and everything else, it's just something that's coming in college football right now, and you have to keep improving on it.
To that end, Ellis, what was your thoughts on the proposed rule change, which even though it's tabled for now, it could be back a year from now?
I don't really know. I think the slow-down guys are really not worried about injuries, and I think the speed-up guys are really not worried about how many plays they get. I think everybody's trying to get their own piece of the pie. But the bottom line is the rules, But I don't know. I don't know how it doesn't make any sense to me what was proposed. If we want to go fast, I think what they ought to do is they ought to make a rule that you have to snap the ball in 15 seconds so you get delay of game. If you want to go slow, then we just need to go back to the old 25-second clock. But the whole thing, to me, is just people arguing for what they think is going to be an advantage to them. And it really doesn't matter because that's the rules and that's what we're going to play.
Let's just talk about kind of shuffling some guys around up front on the defensive line and kind of getting some different looks. How good is that in the spring to be able to do something like that?
Well, it really hasn't been as much of a luxury as it's been a necessity. And in addition to being very thin at defensive end in spring practice, we also Elijah got a groin the very first drill of the very first practice. So we've actually got Montravius and Gabe working out at defensive end more as a necessity than an evaluation. Both of them do some pretty impressive things out there, but we need their depth and rotation in the interior line. So I don't foresee that being permanent, but it would be good that if we did have some unusual rash of injuries next year or something occur, those guys have got the ability to maybe go out there and help us.
Ellis, can you talk about the star position this spring, what you had to do in there?
Well, Threezy had a broken hand. So he was very limited early, so we decided with Justin Garrett whether to go inside or star. We put him out at star. He's had a good spring so far. McEnroe has made a lot of improvement. He came in obviously without the advantage of spring ball last year, and he really never got caught up as a true freshman. But spring ball is really helping him. So he's had a couple of really good practices out there, and we're seeing daily improvement out of him. Whether Justin stays there or not, all of that, there are a lot of factors in that equation. How deep do we build the depth at inside backer, and how soon do we get Threezy back? All kind of questions. But Justin has been very unselfish in moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out. It's been probably hard on him to learn it both, but he's had a good spring so far, and right now we can't afford to move him.
How good is it to have him as far as just a guy that can stop a run? Robinson was saying he's probably the best run fit guy at the start position.
Yeah, he had a great spring and was on his way to a really good preseason, and then he had the foot injury. And by the time he came back, Threezy had established himself as the starter, and we thought Justin maybe could help us more in the box. But then he hurt his foot again. I hope he'll return to the Justin Garrett. If y'all can remember back to this time last year, and y'all would ask us, did we find any of those impact plays? D was out, and Justin Garrett was the guy. And then unfortunately he had an injury and didn't play many plays for us. So I hope he can return to the Justin Garrett that we remembered from last spring.
What have you seen out of Derek Montre and Jonathan Ford at that safety
Moncrief has been an extremely pleasant surprise. When you get a junior college player who's not played in your system, you always wonder how long it's going to take him to transition. He's making some mistakes out there, as you would expect, but I think at this point he is way beyond all of the new safeties. I say the word new, meaning those that we don't already know about, the Whiteheads, the Holseys, the guys that have been back there. We know what they can do. It's a matter of them just continuing to improve their craft and get better, be better as leaders and players. But of the rest of the bunch that's fighting for those spots at the star boundary safety, he's been probably the most impressive. He's had a really good spring so far.
He isn't here, he won't be available for spring, Bolsey, but how does his return impact how you look at Moncrief, Jonathan Ford, Trevon Reed? Is he going to be the corner? Is he going to come back as a safety?
Well, and that's our star. You know, it's one of those things I mentioned earlier. You know, Josh is big enough to play boundary safety, big enough to play star. You know, we would probably rather have a bigger star backer, but he could end up being the best star if we don't have any depth at linebacker and we have to move Justin. Boundary corner. That's a really critical spot in our roster. Mincy's made a good transition so far, but Josh may end up moving back to boundary corner, you know, if we have to move Mincy around. So we've got a lot of flexibility, got a lot of moving parts. Part of that's good, but to be truthful, I'd like to come out of spring with a little bit better idea about where they're all going to fit, and we can get a little better continuity. When we started having that rash of injuries last year during the season, a lot of our consistency was lost, and that's what can happen. So it may take spring and a little bit of preseason. Got some good-looking freshmen that are going to come in, and you never want to count on them to solve your problems, but there's always some pleasant surprises in those groups, and I'm sure some of those will help us too. So you're talking about guys like Garrett moving around, you're talking about guys like Holsey moving around, you know, you're talking about some guys that have the ability to do that for us, but I think the sooner we get them settled in the right place, the better off we're going to be.
You flip-flopped Chris and Casanova at linebacker. What have you seen out of them in their new spots so far?
Some of it physically has been very good. Chris has made a real quick transition and has looked really good. Casanova's been bothered by a bruised bone in his hip, and he has not been practicing very much. The 3 days he was healthy and full speed out there, he had some really good practices. If I had to throw a guess up there right now, and both of them back to full speed, probably would leave McKenzie and Mike and keep Frost at will. But even today's practice, Chris played both as the practice went on. He rotated at both spots, and I'd like for him to continue to do that. You know, we had a lot of linebackers last year. It was sort of linebacker by committee. I'm not sure we're going to have that many guys. If we get into a situation in the fall where I really feel like we only got 3 guys that are ready, I want it to be a ability to play either one of those guys at Mike or Will and then get that third best guy on the field with them wherever he is. If we develop some better depth, I see Casanova at the Mike and Chris at the Will.
What about the guys behind them?
Who's that?
What about the guys behind those?
Doing okay. Frost is, Flowers is having a better spring and a little bit better consistency than he's had in the past. He's doing some good things. I think he's still got a lot of improvement to do. Javier, unfortunately, I think could have benefited from spring ball more than any of them, and he broke that bone in his foot in the SEC championship game, and he will not practice this spring. But I certainly still feel like he's going to still be in the picture. Cameron Toney has caught on pretty well. You know, when you put him on the scout team and decide to redshirt him, they don't get many reps at your base defense, and he's almost going back to square one, learning what he's doing. But he's had a pretty solid spring. None of them have really jumped out and had anything dynamic, but I feel like I'm gaining some confidence in all of them.
You've done some drills one-on-one, one-on-two with Cass and Chris. What have you kind of gotten out? What was the thought process of doing that?
Which was doing the what?
Did like one-on-two drills, just specifically with Chris and Cass, several times during the time we were there. So what are you getting out of it? What was the thought process doing the one-on-one?
Just basically building fundamentals, especially in the coverage aspects. They end up covering backside of the backfield quite a bit in our base defense, and they need to improve the fundamental skills quite a bit. So we've worked that a lot. And we get good routes out of our backs too that helps them develop.
Is there anything this spring that you're finally being able to work on that you just weren't able to do so last spring or last fall?
Not really. We tried to, matter of fact, we may have gone too fast last year. We may have put too much in too quickly. But this year, really, what we've been able to do is almost the reverse of that. We know our personnel better, and we know what they can do, and what we can be really good at, and what we don't need to be fooling with. And frankly, at this stage of installation and putting in schemes, we've done less this year than last year.
What have you seen from Jonathan Jones over at corner this far, and some of the other corners? Trevon Reed moving to defense, Cameron Melton. What have you seen from those guys?
Yeah, well, Trevon's had a really good camp. He's still learning the system, but I think, from Melvin's telling him one-on-ones and just cover skills and playing the position physically, he's been a really bright spot. We think he's going to help us tremendously. Jonesy, we've just got to keep him healthy. We know he can play, and he'll have some roles to play, I'm sure, on third down and long. But we're starting to build a little depth back again out there at corner. And the safety positions, there's depth there too. Their progress has been a little less consistent. They still got a lot more consistency to build as far as trusting those guys in game situations, but that's starting to look a lot better too.
Ellis, you had to play a game this weekend, and who will be your third linebacker?
Tomorrow, probably Cameron Toney.
Time for a few more. Was there ever any thought of moving Parisi around, maybe putting him back at your safety or maybe a corner and moving somebody else in the start?
I could see possibly having to go to safety if we have some kind of disaster with these guys not ever coming to the front as far as being good enough. But right now, we certainly haven't found a star or two stars, I should say, that we can afford to move him. He's got the cover skills. We had him at corner before we had to move him. As fast as he is, he wasn't as natural a corner as you might think. He's more of a contact player, but he could play deep zone as well as any of those guys we got out there. I don't see that happening, but it could in an emergency.
What do you feel about the depth at corner this spring going forward?
What are we doing about it?
How do you feel about it?
Feel about a lot better. You've got Mincy back, Jones back, TJ's improved quite a bit, and Cameron Melton, he really is coming into being a really good, reliable player. We got some good young ones coming in that I think are going to be okay as long as they can learn what we do. They're going to be physically really good. Starting to develop some depth out there again. Rudy Ford in the safety position. Rudy's, other than making some mistakes just from lack of repetition, Rudy's made some really good plays for us out there.
What's Anthony Swain's stats with the program?
Right now he's working on some things through the semester that have got to be taken care of before we can even approach it.
You mentioned quite a few guys.